Not much more, part bunker, part junk store. Dr. Meat was all in blue. I said, I'm looking for sandwich meat, but it looks like you might not have that. He said, I don't understand what you're saying. What are you driving at? I said, I'm looking for sandwich meat, but it looks like you might not have that. He said, I don't understand what you're saying. What are you driving at? I said, some kind of meat to put in sandwiches, like roast beef or salami. Salami, he said, yes, yes, salami. And suddenly he descended, intent upon a half salami in his cooler next to a cluster of plastic grapes. Say how much you want, say thick or thin, but first, listen, do you believe that back in Iraq I was a doctor of medicine? He took an oath to serve the sick, but here he stands instead. It's easier to serve things that are already dead. For years he endured, he cured Sunni, Shia, and Kurd. He had a practice in Tikrit. Now he's Dr. Meat. He took out rubber gloves and snapped them on his hands. I thought, great, he's going to check my prostate. But he said, I actually have sausage from Sudan, Tunisia, Lebanon. Lebanon, I said, yes, yes, but no pig, no pork, no ham. I am a religious man. Here it is done, 182 grams. I couldn't bring myself to say it. Dr. Meat, you didn't even weigh it. Then he leaned in like he was confiding in a lifelong confidant. This one's on me, and all the meat's halal. He had healed his country in the first Gulf. More blood than an abattoir floor. A cousin in Calgary sponsored the doctor, got him out of Iraq and the visa fast-tracked, but reality of life in his adopted nation deflated the elation and expectation. His credentials could not be transferred, was the word from the Canadian Medical Association. I backed out slowly, my sliced salami packed neatly in styrofoam and plastic wrap, profuse thank yous and a promise to return. He said, business is slow, it's as though you people are always on vacation. I said, it only looks that way, Dr. Meat. A side effect of Dominion's botched operation. He took an oath to serve the sick, but here he stands instead. It's easier to serve things that are already dead. For years he endured, he cured Sunni, Shia, and Kurd. He had a practice in Tikrit. Now he's Dr. Meat. Thank you. So that was a piece that was based on a story many years ago. My girlfriend told me on Canada Day when she was out looking for meat for an omelet for us. And it's an example of the Calgary artist ripping off someone else's story without having all the facts. Sometimes when I go about town, I try to, we're like vultures. And we try to find interesting anecdotes and stories and characters, and then we embellish them and decorate them with our own narratives. And I wrote this piece, and I performed it, and I recorded it, and then I started feeling guilty because I didn't know if any of this was true, and of course I didn't think it was. So I actually went to Dr. Meat, the shop, and I gave him a copy of my CD with a note saying, I apologize. I hope you don't consider this slanderous. If you do, please contact me. And I'll at the very least give you my SOCAN royalties. But he never got in touch. So maybe he was just baffled. I've been thinking quite a bit, obviously, about the themes of this summit. Themes of nationalism and xenophobia, national identity, along with the other themes, which I'll probably get to in a bit. But I wanted to do a piece for you that, for me, kind of reflects the attitude that I think a lot of people have towards other countries, and the attitude a lot of countries have towards other countries. And that is to not really see them as cultural identities, but to see them more as economic opportunities. Usually, with tourists, everybody tells you should go visit a place because it's cheap. They don't really talk about much else. They say, oh yeah, no, it's great. It's totally cheap, but you got to get there in the next couple of years because it's going to go up. That's sort of the way we discuss travel in many ways. And this piece is an example of that, and about how, when that is the way we think of a country, you end up ruining it. So I was in Poland a few years ago, and I was on the street, and on a news box there was a photograph on the top of on the front of the weekly newspaper of a guy with his shirt off falling out of a porta potty backwards. And to one side was a guy laughing and drinking a beer, and to the other side was a guy throwing up. And on his back, written in lipstick, it said, "I suck cock." And I asked my Polish friend, what does this headline of this newspaper article say? And he said, "Oh, it says the British rape Krakow." Because of course Poland was and still is a place where all of the young British men go to have their bachelor parties. And so anyway, the attitude that I think people have towards other countries is again similar towards the attitude countries have towards other countries with free trade and globalization. And I think of Canadian mining companies going down to Latin America and poisoning people's water supplies and allowing their security guards to brutalize the local women, all in the name of some money. Man, you should have been here 15 years ago. That's when I was here. It's totally changed. It's not the same now. There, that was this funky underground pub that served warm raspberry beer in mismatched mugs for a quarter. Ticked off every order on a coaster. It went from smile to sneer, from beautiful and cheap to tacky and dear. The British rape Krakow. You'd have been here 15 years ago, like me, you'd be a novelty. You wouldn't have to fork out a mint for a chick. Sometimes they seemed legitimately interested. And the square, well now it's all food, retail and ads. Back then there was this Cold War bunker that served cold vodka, had experimental jazz. They knew what I wanted, the bartender nodded, but it goes from cordial to strained, to barely tolerated, to basically disdained. The British rape Krakow. They moved through the East EU like a pimply fog, finished raping the corpse they made of Prague. So for 30 quid, they'll catch an EasyJet plane, gonna rape Estonia, gonna rape Ukraine. Ow! Man, I was there just in time. Before the decline, before it got hit by the worst, yeah, I got to her first. In the hour, she was deflowered, when she was still hopeful and grateful for tropical fruit and glimpses of casual wealth. Yeah, I had her to myself, I had her all to myself. Before she knew openness was just open for business, she never saw it coming, and now she is leaving to go work construction in London and Dublin, 'cause she can get more pay picking berries in Norway, put more in her purse than a Polish teacher or nurse. And I'll keep coming back to eat kebabs and get pissed and tell you about what I saw that you missed, and say how my real estate ventures have blossomed, 'cause I got in early, I got in at the bottom, and I have my memories, and if yours are sullied, well that's what we do. We make pretty things ugly. We make pretty things ugly. The British rape Krakow. 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 Thanks. I've got that pizza brain, you know, where when the cheese moves right to the top of your head and kind of squats on it? There was a Simpsons episode where Apu comes and lives with the Simpsons for a while and feeds them all this vegetarian East Indian food. And when Homer eats it, it pushes the fat blockage away from his brain, and he all of a sudden has an incredible vocabulary. So someone get me some salad. Basically, what I'm asking. So again, one of the themes. Thank you very much. Of the summit that I was interested in was the idea of art in public spaces. One of the mandates I had as poet laureate was, I was poet laureate from 2012 to 14, and the first one in Calgary. So it wasn't really defined, there was no precedent, so I could sort of define the role to some degree with consultation with people who were involved in City and the sponsors of the program and other artists. And of course, one of the things that every artist in Calgary keeps saying is, how do we get art into the public sphere? How do we get things onto the streets? How do we get things to people who otherwise wouldn't see it? How do we get people at the drop-in center and the mustard seed to experience art? How do we get people on their commute to experience art? And of course, we can do that with graffiti and with public murals. That kind of thing. There is a program at the drop-in center where they have musicians come at lunch hour and play. I just did it last week, and it was a wonderful experience. One of the things that I wanted to do also was bring poetry just out into the outdoors. And so we started this event called the Poetry Shuffle, where 20 or 30 poets walk for about 4 kilometers, 5 kilometers. We did one along the Bow River. We did one in the Plus 15 system just a couple weeks ago. And we just recite poetry. And we don't charge for it. We just recite poetry, and we ask people who are walking by to come listen if they want to. And of course, every time we've done it, people will follow along for a couple of stops. They'll listen to a couple of poems, then move on their way. And it's a really nice way to have poetry be this public yet fluid thing that isn't a big deal. People don't, it's not an event that people feel obliged to go to. It's just part of their atmosphere, which is super cool. Of course, when we did it a couple weeks ago, through the Plus 15 system on a Sunday, every place that we read, we got accosted by security guards. So that's where the surveillance state part of the summit comes into. It was weird. They were always saying, "What are you doing here?" And we said, "We're reading poetry." And they said, "Well, get on with it," or like, "Move back from that wall," or "How long will you be here?" They were really threatened. And also, I should be fair. They were probably just bored. A lot of security guards at malls and in Plus 15 systems just have nothing to do. So when 30 poets came wandering through, they got all excited. But of course, and again, so those are the struggles of the Calgary artist. One of the big ones, of course, is in Calgary, built as we are with a relatively small central core, and then suburbs for miles and miles and miles, where people don't really. At the end of the day, when they go back home, they tend not to come back into the downtown. It's too much of a labor. So theater companies like Swallow a Bicycle, local theater company, they did this thing called the Cafe Show, where they actually brought a show to suburban strip mall cafes. And it was kind of a weird public interactive thing where they had headphones on with scripted dialogue, so that people thought they were overhearing conversations, but they were scripted conversations. And then they would get stranger, and the public would become more engaged the more they would hear of these conversations. But they were very, very popular. But it's tricky because you go to a lot of the residential strip malls in the distant suburbs, and basically they have a sports bar or a faux Irish pub, and it's basically karaoke, maybe a battle of the bands once in a while. But it's difficult to find venues to do more original or experimental art. So that's, I think, one of the really large challenges. I'd like to hear, we're going to have a little Q&A after the performance. I'd like to hear what some of you might suggest as far as ways of getting art into the suburbs in a meaningful way. But many years ago, I got a grant from the Canada Council for the Arts to write a spoken word CD about the underbelly of Calgary. And the nice thing about Canada Council is that they give you money if your work, they actually prefer if your work has absolutely no commercial viability. So I could be as strange as I wanted to, and so the first thing I did is I went undercover as a drywaller in Mackenzie Town, and it was just sort of, really being built at the time, and I was working with a buddy of mine who has a construction company. I actually did work, kind of, but I had my notepad, and I would eavesdrop on people talking on their cell phones on the upper levels and write down what they say, and then at lunchtime I would go to the strip malls and to the cafes, and I would also write down what they were saying. Another example of the sort of predatory behavior of the artist in Calgary. But I love the way people use language, and so many of my pieces are just essentially using other people's words. This is called Bring Our Boys Home. Hey Tara, good, how are you? Nothing, just sitting down finally. Great, no really. It's gorgeous, it's huge. It's a sort of salmon. There's a color code in this subdivision. There's salmon and a yellowy beige and adobe and emerald, but it's more like pistachio. 5, we've kind of set it up like a master bedroom, guest room, office, den, and then the other we leave open for a kid's room and just store stuff in there for now. About 40 minutes, twice as long at rush hour. Yeah, it kind of sucks. I don't know. I'll try getting a couple of clients around here, but it's no big rush. Well, that's it. He's doing great. That's why we could afford it. He's like assistant something, but high up, so he has like a whole team he's responsible for. Well, you know him. He's so good with people. He's like a leader, but everyone likes him. Well, yeah, I suppose you can't have people liking you too much. Actually, that's what he says. It's hard to be like totally buddy-buddy and then also command respect. So his thing now is to be just totally better than everyone else at their job, so they have to respect him. He got one of those headset phones. Yeah, it's funny, I heard him say, we gotta check the KPIs on that one. Key performance indicators, he said. There, now you've learned something new. No, I should cook tonight. We've been eating pizza all week. Yeah, well, he won't eat vegetables, he doesn't like spices, so it's easy. He doesn't even like rice. He runs every lunch and works out like 3 or 4 times a week. Yeah, that's what they say, but he's pretty much done once his head hits the pillow. Am I gonna get bored? I'm being really positive, but it's like the carpets are white, which is totally retarded. It makes you not want to do anything to get them dirty. I don't know anyone, and the house still smells like building materials. If I get on his back, then I'm a shrew. And he says it's not easy in the trenches. He calls them the trenches. And sometimes I say I'm just lonely when you're not here, but that sounds pathetic. Bring our boys home, 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 bring our boys home. So I think I released that song just after the second invasion of Iraq. And so I started getting a lot of emails from people asking if I could go and join their anti-war rallies. Which is interesting because it makes you realize that people don't actually listen to lyrics of songs. It was just like bark, 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 bark. Bring our boys home. That must be about the war. So anyway, I thought that was kind of interesting. Well, I'm sure. I mean, it's interesting because I haven't been privy to some of the discussions today, both the live ones and the lectures that you've been watching on the screen. But you know, we've been talking a lot, kind of in the artist community. I talk with my friends a lot about what does it mean to be censored as an artist, to be held back, to be muzzled or silenced. And of course, you know, we live in a country where that doesn't actively happen. Even as poet laureate, you know, I mean, I was poet laureate of an oil town, and nobody at any time came to me and said, you know, you can't touch this sacred cow. Nobody said you cannot do a piece that is anti energy or anti oil sands or something like that. I never did, just because I thought that wasn't really my place as poet laureate, which is kind of cowardly, really, when I think about it now. But it's not, and I mean, honestly, I probably wouldn't have done that anyway. If I wasn't in a position like that, I tend to not prefer, I tend to prefer to not do pieces that are too overt or too obvious or too bang on the head, just because I don't think it makes for good art. It might make for good lectures or good books, but I don't. I tend to try not to inject a really obvious personal opinion. I prefer to try to provoke someone else to have an opinion. But it was interesting. So anyway, I was sat down by the people of the city and the people at Calgary Arts Development, and they said, we know you like to do stuff that sort of is a little on the edge, so let's just go ahead and do that. We expect you to sort of stir things up and be a little bit provocative, and that was nice. I didn't go into it feeling like I needed to toe a line in any way. It's interesting though how we still are controlled and muzzled in some ways. And the thing is governments who have sort of a tendency toward authoritarianism, they've learned from previous governments how not to do it. So of course we're never going to be in a situation where it's like the Stasi and we're all spied on and we all know it. It's all because they learned that didn't really work very well. There are other ways of doing that. And of course, one of the best ways of doing that is through advertising and through finding out what your Google searches are, so that even though I'm looking at articles that are about, Neil Young protesting the oil sands, all of a sudden, every site I go to, whether it's my tennis websites where I like to see, highlights, or CBC, or anything else, there seems to be really big advertisements for the Trans-Canada Pipeline East thing. It's just popping up all over the place. Is it a conspiracy? No, that's just what happens. They know what you're searching for, and then you get bombarded with these advertisements from companies. And the more I look at it, the more I start going, that's not a bad idea. Of course we need to get more stuff out east, So, it's having an effect on me. The propaganda does kind of work. So of course, the government and corporate conspiracy is working to, in some ways, muzzle the artist in different ways, and it's basically just to keep them impoverished. I'm not actually kidding. Okay, so in honor of our fantastic hyper-consumerist culture here in Calgary, there's a few years ago, I was reading an article in Swerve magazine about an American retailer who set up his first business in Calgary. And he was asked, why did you set up, as an American retailer, your first store in Calgary? And he said, well, we didn't want to really risk too much, with our first store. And they said, what do you mean by that? And he said, Well, no offense, but you people will buy anything. He actually said that. My baby and me are heading clear across town, interest-free. Don't pay till spring, absolutely nothing down. There's a yellow salad spinner, baby, seeing if it works. I've been peeking around the racks, checking out the checkout clerks. The bargains are insane, they are the stuff of myth and rumor. Every price is a reflection of the passionate consumer. The hardcover thrillers are down to mass market prices. The 3-in-1 slicer now has a feature that dices. We've got the floral pattern placemats that are dishwasher friendly. I'm gonna get the deck umbrella, but we're holding out for blue. The garden fountain end cap is a gurgling and pumping. There's a handmade Chinese wicker basket just ideal for holding something. Nothing needs a sticker or a lifetime guarantee. If it's faulty, bring it back, get something else for next to free. Wading through savings, swimming through deals, drowning in Best Buys, the borders are blurred. Liquidation world, liquidation world, liquidation. In the regions where legions of heathens sweat, you can bet they don't even know what they're making yet. But you can bet that when they do, they're gonna want a sample too. It's like a cultural exchange with limitless range, and they are slashing, re-slashing the change from your coffee buys. A 1 in 5 chance at an in-store manicure. My baby's got 3, and she's already looking pretty in those patio thongs. She's got a long-running cassette of other artists doing Sting songs. Somewhere there's a monk grooving out on a laptop, getting all the information that he needs for meditation, casting before the flies a giant web of wisdom. Pretty soon he's gonna need to find a leisure suit, while baby and me from the cradle to the grave are gonna save, 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 save. Swimming through deals, drowning in Best Buys, the borders are blurred. Liquidation world, liquidation world, liquidation world. The days of praying for miracles are fading as quickly as unwanted household spills. When unbelievable offers keep on landing in our laps, the biggest concern is that the bag overfills. Now Manager Todd is letting both of us know they've got a demonstration grill giving out smokies as you go. And remember, when you're getting that receipt with a smile, that it's the little guy going that extra mile. Yeah, you gotta have the team. You're nowhere without the team. We couldn't have done it without the team. And in time, sure, baby and me will feel fantastic. Particle board, polyurethane, plastic, the million humble servants of a million hungry nations, with infinite reductions on disposable creations. Here you are, thank you, you're welcome, lifetime invitations. Let it be your lighthouse on the sea of feeling burned. Security's awaiting at the gates of liquidation world. Swimming through deals, drowning in Best Buys, the borders are blurred. Liquidation world, liquidation world, liquidation world. Thank you. All right. Okay, I'll do maybe a couple more pieces for you, and then then I'll stop yelling and screaming, and we'll open up the floor to some questions. If you have any questions or thoughts about either of the themes of the summit as it relates to, my practice as an artist, or any questions about the Poet Laureate gig or anything like that, then please do. Please do tell me. Why don't I do a piece? I'm just going to get my capo. This is another song from the it's in here somewhere. I think it might be with my other. I for sure have it. Just a second. I'm going to make sure I have my capo first. Does anybody have anything they want to ask me right now while I'm looking for my capo? Any thoughts, suggestions, ways to improve the show?
How old is Liquidation World? I think I heard it in the Grand Theater when it was practically a ruin years ago.
Seriously?
Yeah.
Liquidation World, the song,
Yeah.
It's probably about 10 years old. Easily, I think it's got to be at least 10 years old by now. And I don't know how many of you know this, but it seems as though Liquidation World has actually gone under. There is no Liquidation World anymore, which is very, very, very sad. Because it was my dad's favorite place to go shopping. You know what? I'll just do it without the capo. I can't find it. This is called I Have Seen the Future. It's a true story of something that happened in Oak Ridge, which is one of the suburbs in the southwest of Calgary where I grew up. It was the perfect day for tennis. Dad and I were both inspired after watching Roger Federer make quick work of Leighton Hewitt. Our ground strokes were consistent and powerful beyond logic, and in the first set, I was serving like someone who's had lessons. There was flow, there was connection. The toss was slightly forward, my body leaning in anticipation of the volley. And in the second before contact, when I was in mid-swing, someone yelled, "4!" The ball limped through the air and hit the bottom of the net. 3 young men on bikes on the other side of the fence, I said. That was very clever, but actually we're playing tennis. "Fuck you," he retorted. I said, "That's very original." He said, "That's very original," and I asked him if he realized that he was mocking me, mocking him. I suppose this was confusing because he shouted at my dad next. He said, "You look like Santa," and then he said, "Nice hat." And though Dad's burgundy visor might be a little bit outdated, it was still a really lame insult, and clearly Dad and I were winning. I told them they were boring. I told them they were losers. I said, "Go find a hobby. You have no inner lives." I have seen the future, and I don't know what to blame. So I will wish it all the best and continue with my game. I flirted with the thought that I was being unfairly intolerant, that they were just at loose ends and naturally exuberant. Like all young men, showing off, full of bluff and bluster, practicing for a life in sales. I thought back to my own reckless youthful escapades, bushwhacking through the Devonian gardens, sneaking onto the Indian Reserve and taunting free-range cattle, belching on crowded buses, throwing crab apples at cars, downing a 26er of rum and going to the Mormon dances, kicking the soap dispensers off the bathroom walls, Sticking the DJ's mixtapes down the front of my pants, I thought, who wasn't an asshole? I have seen the future, and I don't know what to blame. So I will wish it all the best and continue with my game. They hung out by the hockey rink, yelling incomprehensibly. They made 3 dirty snowballs, came back and threw them at us. Their language became fouler and sexually aggressive. They would do sick things to my family, and Dad and I were a couple. Dad said, "Run along, boys, your mommy's calling you for dinner." They responded to his accent by calling him a border jumper. "Go back to where you came from, you fucking immigrant." Dad said, "But this is a ridiculous thing to say. I mean, this is Canada. I mean, who's not a fucking immigrant?" I mean, sure, I came from Frankfurt in 1955, but I mean, that's 1955. I've been here like great majority of my life, and certainly feel like this is far more my home's in Frankfurt. I mean, go back to where I came from. I mean, this is a strange question to begin with, because actually I was not born in Germany, I was born in Guatemala. My parents went down there to work on a coffee plantation in the 50s, and I was born there. The only reason we left Guatemala is because the Americans flushed out everyone of German descent during the Second World War. We, of course, had to go back to Frankfurt. We were running away from the Russians. We all had to live in my grandmother's small little apartment. It was quite terrible. I have no desire to go back. So this is out of the question. Obviously, I will not go back. And then again, the immigrant question is a silly one because, of course, your stupid parents probably came from Ireland or Scotland or something like this. And then even the first people of this nation came across the Bering Land Bridge or whatever. And also, I don't really see myself as attached to any particular geographical, nationality as defined by a map. I sort of feel like we are all sprung from the same primordial soup. And that this is not really a question that I want to entertain right now with you. So fuck off. I approached them very calmly and asked them in all earnestness, what makes you want to come here and antagonize 2 strangers who are minding their own business and just trying to play some tennis? And after a short pause, the red-faced ringleader said, "'Cause it's funny." And then they rode off. Dad said with chagrin, they must have learned that stuff from their parents. I said, "Don't forget, Dad, we are in Calgary South." And though we carried on, it was clear we were distracted, both of us fantasizing about clubbing them with our rackets. Dad believes in justice, and I believe in hell. And we believe that reckoning comes down within ourselves. And I have seen the future, and I don't know what to blame. So I will wish it all the best and continue with my game. I'll continue with my game. Thank you. All right, well, I just have a couple more minutes left, so why don't I just do one more piece, and then maybe if we can have a little discussion for a few minutes, that would be fantastic. I know I've gone a little bit in the, there's a big government corporate conspiracy direction, a bit occupied on you. But that's because this afternoon I was kind of a little worried about the fact that the Texas-based oil company Kinder Morgan, who is building a new pipeline that they want to put through the Burnaby Hill, which is a supposedly protected area, is suing a few people, including a Simon Fraser University professor named Stephen Collis, for $5 million for thwarting their attempts at surveying the area. And fair enough, they actually ended up getting a court injunction to remove the protesters, but they're throwing the lawsuit on top of it because, as Stephen Collis, who's a poet as well, says, they want to silence them by threatening them with sort of a punitive economic punishment, so that of course they can't afford thousands of dollars in lawyer fees, and they want to use their power tactic as a gigantic corporation to silence them. And they were citing one of the poems that he wrote on his blog as evidence of his intent to damage the company. They were citing the facial expressions of the protesters as evidence that they were aggressive and they meant harm. So there is something, sinister going on. And that's why this is the piece I'll end with. I wrote this while I was Poet Laureate, so it was great because it was a prose piece. It wasn't a poem, and I figured I could slip this one through the post because it was my most kind of, ranty piece. But it's called The Hammer, and I'll finish with this. There's a Bertolt Brecht quote in which he suggests art should not be a mirror held up to reflect reality, but a hammer with which to shape it. In coming years, art in Calgary needs to become a hammer. We talk a lot in the arts community about building bridges, finding consensus, working within the corporate structure, and I would not suggest we stop these initiatives. But I can't think of art in Calgary in 20 or 30 years without thinking of its role in defining that overall social and political trends of the future. While art's reflective qualities, its ability to hold up and expose truths, gives it the power to educate and enlighten, the art world has a responsibility beyond that to actively transcend norms and transform societies through work and action that challenges the tenets of power through subversion and civil disobedience. Why do I immediately feel sheepish suggesting that and question my own assertion? Because the Calgary of today, saturated in a malaise perpetuated by overwork, paralyzing debt, and the banality of consumption, vilifies protest and the very act of questioning assumptions about what life here really means and what we should aspire to. Through relentless and pointed marketing by government, business, and media, we are being told nothing is rotten, there is nothing to resist, and if you do raise a voice about anything, the schoolyard bully tactic of ridicule is quickly employed. Artists must take a lead in social and political activism, re-inject arts into all levels of education, assert themselves in government, flood public spaces and venues of discourse. If we are still asking the question of our citizens, does art matter, we are pathetically lost. That question was answered 30,000 years ago on the cave walls of Lascaux and has been reaffirmed in every civilization since. Artists need to reawaken a lobotomized citizenry and work with non-artist Calgarians who are culturally aware and socially progressive in facilitating real change. Yes, groups like Arts Vote, theater companies like Downstage, Ghost River, Verb address meaningful and urgent issues like climate change, income inequality, debt. A progressive mayor is proving a much-needed wrench in the gears of the status quo, but there is no wrench large enough. I don't want to sing at food bank drives at CBC anymore and see millionaires drop off novelty checks for $10,000 to applause. There shouldn't be a food bank. Most of my family and friends, knee-jerk supporters of toxic ideological movements disguised as political parties, blind cheerleaders of oil and gas, don't look ahead 30 years and see the effects of our recklessness and mismanagement. Artists do. Similarly to how Idle No More is going to bat for all Canadians in trying to protect our water systems, artists need to use their abilities as societal observers to actively motivate a willfully ignorant populace. Obviously, artists are not on a moral or intellectual island. They owe their careers to passionate members of the greater community in all realms who crave a greater level of economic justice and health of our natural world. We are reliant on the courage and forward thinking of the non-artist community and must join their causes, offer our skills, accept their advice, put ourselves like them in the crosshairs of criticism and name-calling, and share in their sense of urgency. Artists are pragmatic. We know there is no utopia. We understand human nature and are ironically driven to create work by many of the things we rail against. But the balance is grotesquely lopsided. We worry not only about the fact our planet is in crisis and that we live in what is essentially the command center of a modern Mordor, we are also dismayed at how, in our day-to-day lives, we eschew aesthetic beauty at so many turns. What thinking human being can condone the modern sports bar as model venue for social interaction? The frightening conformity of the monster suburb strip mall developments, the continual visual and auditory bombardment of advertising. A potential bacon shortage gets more press than an omnibus bill. If we're going to ignore history and reality and sink our own Titanic, so be it. But there's no excuse for it to look so ugly on the way down. Artists, bare your teeth and roar. Put yourself on the line. Defy the plutocracy. Land yourself in jail. Don't be vague or conciliatory in your work. Engage and form alliances with all those in the non-artist community who share your concerns and have connections to the governmental and corporate power structure. Demand more. Define your outrage. Or, in 30 years, you'll either be playing country music at the Encana Stampede breakfast in an oxygen mask, or be an enemy of the state, putting on silent plays in a dim basement, and your thoughtful audience, hungry for culture, will wonder where you've gone. Thank you. So, there. I needed to get a bit of a rant out of my system. That was for Stephen Collis, who's, the poor guy is probably really worried about that lawsuit right now.